just to help her cheating husband for something terrible he did that put the life of their only daughter in danger. She has no choice but to walk naked through the village. This happened in a village called Umuaba, where there was a woman named Epereka. She was very beautiful, and everyone in the village loved her. Epereka was the daughter of the village chief, but she didn't live with her parents. She stayed with her uncle, who had taken care of her since she was little. One day, it was time for Epereka to find a husband. She met a man named Amadi. Amadi was very handsome. All the girls in the village liked him and wished they could marry him. But Amadi only wanted Epereka. She liked him too. He made her heart feel warm, and she was so happy to have him. But when Epereka brought Amadi home, her parents didn't like him. Her mother especially was worried. She told Epereka, "This man, Amadi, is not good. I feel something bad about him. His family has strange traditions. Please, my daughter, don't marry him." But Epereka loved Amadi too much. She told her parents, "Amadi is different. He is kind to me, and he will be a good husband. I don't care what you say. I will marry him." Epereka's parents tried to warn her. They said, "We are your parents, and we know what is best. Amadi's family has a history of bad things. If you marry him, something terrible could happen." But Epereka didn't care. She was so in love with Amadi that she said, "If you don't support me, I will marry him without you." And just like that, Epereka decided to marry Amadi, not listening to her parents' warnings. She started planning the wedding with her uncle, who didn't mind because he loved money and just wanted to see the marriage happen. Now, everyone wondered what would happen. Could there be danger ahead for Epereka? When the wedding day came, she didn't invite her parents. Instead, she asked her uncle to act as her father. Her uncle loved money, and he didn't care about the warnings from Epereka's parents. He agreed quickly and smiled all through the ceremony. The wedding was big, and the whole village came to celebrate. Epereka and Amadi were now husband and wife. Soon after the wedding, Epereka became pregnant, and in no time, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Epereka and Amadi were so happy. Their house was filled with joy and laughter. Then, just 3 years later, Epereka gave birth again, this time to twins. They had 3 children now, and Epereka's heart was full. Everything seemed perfect. She would sometimes think about her parents and laugh inside her heart. They were wrong, she thought. Nothing bad has happened. My life is good. But even as Epereka felt happy, something was quietly changing around her. She didn't know it yet, but misfortune was slowly coming closer. After the twins were born, things started to change. Amadi, who used to be home early, began coming back late at night. When Epereka asked him where he had been, he always had an excuse. "I had a meeting," he would say. "There was work to finish." But deep down, Epereka knew something wasn't right. Amadi was spending too much time away from home, and his excuses didn't feel true. Epereka didn't like this change. She worried about Amadi coming home late and started feeling lonely. One night, she decided to talk to Amadi's family. She hoped they could help, so she went to them and told them everything. But instead of helping, Amadi's family just laughed. They said, "Why are you complaining? You're a wife in this family. In our family, a wife should never question her husband or his actions. Didn't Amadi tell you that before you married him?" Epereka felt so helpless. No one was on her side. Her uncle didn't care. Her parents weren't involved. And now even Amadi's family wasn't helping. She cried and cried, wondering how she could make things better. One quiet afternoon, Epereka made a decision. She needed to know the truth. So, when Amadi left the house, she followed him. She stayed hidden, watching him from afar. And that's when she discovered something terrible. Amadi had another wife in a nearby village. He had been living a double life all this time. Epereka's heart broke. She couldn't believe that the man she loved, the father of her children, had betrayed her like this. The next morning, she confronted Amadi. "How could you do this to me?" she cried, her voice shaking with pain. But Amadi wasn't sorry. Instead, he was angry. "Don't you dare question me," he shouted. "I am the man of this house, and I can do whatever I want." And with that, he beat her. Epereka's pain wasn't just in her heart anymore. It was on her body too. She felt broken, but she didn't know how to escape this life. But little did she know that this is just the beginning, as things are about to get even worse with Amadi's family. Years went by and Epereka's life was filled with silent pain. She endured Amadi's betrayal, his coldness, and the burden of raising her children alone, while he spent his time with his other wife. She kept it all to herself, hoping things would one day get better. But something far worse was waiting in the shadows. Their first daughter, Ella, was turning 10, and Epereka wanted the day to be special. She arranged a small celebration, and surprisingly, Amadi stayed home. For the first time in years, someone who usually ignored his family suddenly decided to stay home. He acted like he cared. Amadi even invited his friends and family to celebrate Ella's birthday. It was unusual, and Epereka didn't understand why. Epereka felt a small spark of hope. Maybe things would be different now. The day was full of joy and laughter. Ella was happy, and Epereka was glad too, thinking the family was coming together at last. But little did she know, her happiness was about to be shattered. Because as night fell, after all the guests had left, Amadi and his family gathered around Epereka. Amadi and his parents sat her down, their faces serious. The air felt heavy, and Epereka's heart began to race. "There is something you need to know," Amadi's father began, his voice cold. "Now that your daughter has turned 10, it's time for you to know the family secret." He paused for a while, and then he continued. "In our family, there's an ancient tradition. When the first child reaches 10 years old, the mother must perform a ritual to keep the child, herself, and her husband alive." Epereka listened, confused. What tradition? What could they possibly want? Amadi's mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "For the child to live, you, the mother, must walk naked through the village from sunrise to sunset. If you refuse, your daughter will die. And not just her, you too will lose your life. Amadi will also be cursed." Epereka's heart stopped. Her blood ran cold. "What?" she gasped, her voice shaking. "Walk naked through the village? No, I can't. I won't." She felt like she couldn't breathe. But Amadi's parents showed no mercy. "It's the way things have always been," they said, their eyes unblinking. "If you don't, your daughter has 7 days to live. After that, she's gone. And so are you." Terror gripped Epereka's heart. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was this a nightmare? How could they ask her to do something so terrible? The very thought of walking through the village, naked for all to see, made her feel sick to her stomach. But if she didn't, her daughter would die. She looked at Amadi, hoping he would speak up for her, defend her, but he didn't. He only stared back at her, his eyes cold and uncaring. "You don't have a choice," he said flatly. "It's the tradition. If you want to live, you'll do it." Epereka's world was spinning. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was trapped. Epereka was in shock. The thought of walking naked through the village haunted her. She couldn't sleep, she couldn't eat. How could she? It was a nightmare come true. The next morning, she fell to her knees, pleading with Amadi. Please, Amadi, don't make me do this. There must be another way. I can't face such shame, she cried, her voice trembling. But Amadi didn't even blink. He looked at her with cold, uncaring eyes. You have no choice, he said sternly. This is our tradition. If you refuse, we all die. You will walk, or the child's blood will be on your hands. His words cut through her like a knife. Epereka's heart sank. She had nowhere to turn. Desperate, she decided to do what she should have done long ago. She went back to her parents. As she stood outside their door, her body shaking, she knocked softly. At first, there was silence. Then her mother's voice came from inside, sharp and bitter. Go to your uncle. He's the one who gave you away to Amadi's family. We warned you, but you didn't listen. But Epereka didn't leave. She fell to the ground and begged. I'm sorry, Mama. I was wrong. I should have listened. But now, I'm in danger. My daughter's life is in danger. Please help me. Her father's voice was hard and filled with anger. You made your choice, Epereka. We warned you about Amadi. We told you something terrible would happen, but you didn't listen. Now, you come to us for help? Tears streamed down Epereka's face as she fell to her knees in front of the door. Please, I beg you. I've lost everything. I have no one else. If I don't do this, our daughter will die. I will die. For a long moment, there was silence. Then the door slowly opened, and her father stepped outside. His face was stern, but his eyes softened as he saw the broken look on his daughter's face. Come inside, he said quietly. Epereka's parents listened to her story. They were horrified by what Amadi's family demanded of her. Though they were still hurt by her disobedience, their hearts softened. Her mother sighed deeply and said, the tradition of Amadi's family is dark. If you do this, it will ruin you. But if you don't, the curse could take your child. Her father nodded. We can't fight their traditions directly, but there may be a way out. You must leave the village tonight. If you escape before the 7 days are up, the curse will not follow you. Epereka looked at them in disbelief. Escape? With my children, how can I do that? Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. We will help you. When night falls, you will take your children and run. You must get far, far away before anyone notices you are gone. As darkness fell, Epereka's parents prepared her for the escape. It was a night so quiet that even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Epereka's parents had packed everything, food, blankets, and her 3 children, ready for the escape. The plan was simple: run far enough beyond the village boundary, and the curse would lose its power. Run as fast as you can, her mother whispered, her eyes filled with worry. Do not look back. But as Epereka stepped out into the night with her children, her heart raced. Little did she know that this escape plan would even get matters worse, because her chances were slim. Epereka's heart raced as she clutched her children's hands, stepping carefully through the darkness. Her only thought was escape, freedom from the terrible ritual that awaited her. With each step, she felt both fear and hope swirling inside her like a storm. As they approached the edge of the village, the moon peeked from behind the clouds, casting faint light over their path. The boundary was just a few steps away. Epereka's heart pounded louder in her chest. They were almost there. But then, out of the shadows, a voice roared, "Where do you think you're going?" It was Amadi. Epereka froze, her blood turning cold. Amadi had returned early from visiting his other wife, and there he stood, his eyes burning with fury. He saw the packed bags, the children clinging to their mother, and he knew what she was trying to do. "You dare try to run!" Amadi shouted, his voice filled with rage. Without warning, he grabbed Epereka by the arm, yanking her back toward the village. Her children cried out, terrified. "Please, Amadi," Epereka begged, tears streaming down her face. "I can't do this. I can't walk naked through the village." But Amadi's face was twisted in anger. "You have no choice. You belong to me, and you will follow our tradition. If you try to run again, I'll make sure you never see the light of day." Amadi dragged her back home, and Epereka's heart shattered into a million pieces. All her hope for escape had vanished in an instant. The shame, the humiliation she had been trying to avoid now seemed impossible to escape. The next morning, word spread quickly through the village that Epereka had tried to flee. Amadi's family, knowing the escape had failed, began preparing for the dreaded ritual immediately. As dawn broke, the village was eerily quiet. The sun rose slowly as if even the sky felt the weight of what was about to happen. Epereka's pleas for mercy echoed in the small room. "Please, Amadi, don't make me do this. I'm begging you," she cried, her voice shaking. "I will die of shame if I walk naked through the village. Have mercy." But Amadi and his family had no pity. His mother looked down at her coldly and said, "This is our tradition, Epereka. You agreed to it when you married into this family. It is the only way to save your child and yourself. The ritual must be done." Amadi stood by, unmoved. "It's too late to beg now," he said sharply. "You'll do what's required, or the curse will take us all." Epereka's heart felt like it was breaking into pieces. She knew she couldn't refuse. If she did, her daughter's life would be taken, and hers too. There was no one left to help her. No one would listen. The family began preparing for the ritual. They brought out the ceremonial items, the drums, and the cloth that would be removed from her body. The village had been informed, and soon everyone would be watching. With trembling hands, Epereka was stripped of her clothes. She stood there, exposed, vulnerable, her body shaking in the cool morning air. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Then Amadi took her by the hand and led her to the center of the village. The walk was slow and painful, each step heavier than the last. The villagers gathered, their eyes filled with shock and pity as they watched the once admired daughter of the chief walk naked through the streets. Epereka's face burned with humiliation, her eyes lowered to the ground, trying to hide her shame. But she couldn't. There was no hiding from the stares, the whispers, the laughter of some who delighted in her suffering. She felt her dignity slipping away with every step. For the entire day, Epereka was forced to walk, exposed to everyone. She blamed herself for not listening to her parents, for marrying into this cursed family. She could hear the voices of her mother and father in her mind, warning her, but it was too late. But this wasn't the end, because what was about to happen next, the way Amadi's family later went on, no one had seen it coming. In fact, their next act was even more heartless than walking naked. And everyone was shocked and pitied Epereka even more. You see, after the ritual was done, things didn't end there. Epereka's heart was shattered. She had walked through the village, naked and humiliated, with the eyes of everyone upon her. Now, as she stood at the door of her home, she felt empty, like a part of her had been taken away, never to return. Little did she know the gravity of what awaited her next. Her once bright spirit was gone, replaced by a deep sadness that weighed her down. She knew she couldn't stay in Umuaba anymore. How could she, when everyone had seen her in such a shameful state. The village, which had once been her home, now felt like a place of endless judgment and whispers. She could hear the murmurs in her mind, even when no one was around. The shame followed her everywhere. Epereka walked through her home in silence, gathering her few belongings. Her children, who had seen her broken but didn't fully understand, watched quietly as she packed their things too. She didn't want them to grow up in this place where the shadow of the ritual would always hang over them. She made up her mind. She would leave. She had to leave. Epereka wrapped her children in blankets, picked up the few bags she had, and stepped out of the house for the last time. She didn't look back. The village that once celebrated her marriage to Amadi, that had once admired her beauty and grace, now felt like a cage she needed to escape. With each step away from Umwaba, the weight of her decision grew heavier. She had no idea where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stay. The road ahead was unknown and filled with uncertainty, but it was better than living in a place where her spirit had been crushed. As she walked into the unknown with her children by her side, Epereka's heart whispered the question she couldn't ignore. Where will I go now? Epereka walked away from Umwaba with her children by her side, the village fading into the distance. As she left, her parents, who understood the depth of her pain, sent her their blessings with heavy hearts. We forgive you, our daughter, her father said softly. We know you cannot stay here, but wherever you go, we pray that you find peace. Her mother wiped away tears, knowing that this was the only way Epereka could heal. Start a new life, Epereka. Don't let this shame follow you forever, she whispered. Epereka nodded, grateful for their forgiveness, even though it came too late to save her from what had already happened. With her parents' blessings, Epereka set off, determined to build a new life far from the whispers and judgment of the village. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had to be strong for her children. The past couldn't be changed, but she was ready to create a future where no one knew of her shame. After leaving the village, Epereka knew one thing for sure. Her marriage to Amadi was over. The love she once had for him had been destroyed by the pain and humiliation he had put her through. Without hesitation, she divorced him, never looking back. Amadi's betrayal had cut too deep, and she could no longer live under the shadow of his cruel family and their dangerous traditions. She moved far away to a place where no one knew her story, where she could start fresh with her children. In this new land, there were no reminders of the past, no villagers to whisper about her, no cold eyes to judge her. Slowly, Epereka began to heal. She found work, made new friends, and created a life where she could hold her head high once again. Amadi, meanwhile, and his family never felt any guilt for what they had done. They acted heartlessly. To them, the ritual was just a part of their tradition, something that had to be upheld, no matter the cost. They never understood the pain they caused Epereka, nor did they care. In their eyes, tradition was above everything, even if it meant breaking a person's spirit. But Epereka was finally free. Free from the oppressive family, free from the traditions that had nearly destroyed her, and free to live a life of her own choosing. Though the scars of the past would always be there, she knew she had made the right choice by walking away. Her story, filled with pain, love, betrayal, and resilience, became a quiet warning to those who heard it. It spoke of the dangers of ignoring the wisdom of elders, of rushing into choices without understanding the consequences. Most importantly, it reminded others that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for a new beginning. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, share it with your family and friends, comment on it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.